Hi, this is Yesaya Ferdinand, and you're listening to Invalid Opinion, a show where I talk about what caught my eye this week in pop culture, locally and internationally. This week, I'm going to talk about the works of two most prominent female directors out there, Sofia Coppola and Jane Campion. I'll talk about Coppola's Lost in Translation and also Campion's Top of the Lake. And to close the show, I'll give you my last recommendations, things that I think you should get a glimpse to. So stay tuned. Now, this episode is a bit of a tribute after Sofia Coppola became the second woman to win the Best Director category in Cannes. Her movie The Beguiled is a triumph, as I've read, in this year's Cannes, but because it hasn't been released yet, I want to talk about the most prominent work of Sofia Coppola, which is The Lost in Translation. Lost in Translation is, I think, one of the best example of Sofia Coppola's work, not just because it was one of the earlier works of Sofia Coppola, but also because it was one of her most acclaimed work, and to me, one of the best Sofia Coppola movies out there. Lost in Translation is a story about an aging actor, Bob, and a college graduate, Charlotte, who bonded in Tokyo, a town or in a country, Japan, that they have no one with, and they did not speak the language, and it was interesting to see how they befriend each other and keep each other company in a country and a town that are so foreign for them. This is Sofia, as I said, most prominent work. Lost in Translation won the Oscars for original screenplay in 2004, making the Coppolas as the second family with three generations winner of Oscars. One is Frances, and then Roman, and then her, and the other family is the Houston family. This, to me, is a very meaningful movie for myself, of course. The first time I've watched The Lost in Translation is back when I was in high school. I did not care about this movie at all because I think it's boring and it's so slow, and I did not have something relatable to the project. And I watched it again for this podcast last week on my train ride to Jogja, which I think is soothing because I'm going to a place where I know nothing about. First of all, I don't have a family in there. I have a family outside the city, but not in Jogja. I was solo traveling in a sense. So I was alone, and I get this movie when I watch this. I even teared up in some of the scenes, but in some ways I get it. It took me a while to adjust to this movie because this movie is so quiet, yet at the same time speaks a lot about these characters' modern life in a city that they barely know about. We get a glimpse of their daily life in Tokyo. Charlotte finds her time with that I think also makes her more developed as a human being after seeing more cultural places in Japan, their temples, historical buildings. There's one scene who is again very quiet, where Charlotte is going to one of these, I think it was a palace, and then there's a kabuki woman just walking with kimono and being escorted by a man in yukata, and they are escorting this woman. I thought this was kind of like this princess escorting them, and it looks like the princess more is fragile, and Charlotte's just seeing it. Charlotte's become the a voyeur of this situation, and I think it gives a glimpse of how this character is really just wanted to be someone else, someone that I think she hasn't found yet. And it's the prominent theme of the character, which is like she's just out of college, married with this guy, this photographer who essentially she's accompanying him to Japan for a photo shoot, but he's going away and she's left alone in a hotel and she's finding herself. She's just out of college and she doesn't know what to do. And I think that Japan is a way for her to find who she wanted to be. And in some of the scenes, and in some of the scenes that I don't think it's just a glimpse or vignette of her life in Japan without Bob or and without anyone, gives that sense of finding or becoming, which is another theme of some of Coppola's movie. Is I think one of the quotes I've read somewhere else about her movies and asked Coppola describing her movie is that my movies is not about being but becoming, and that is what Charlotte is. And I think that's also what Bob is. Bob is finding his Japan in some ways through the entertainment industry. He is paid to be a spokesperson for this Scotch companies in Japan, and he is becoming, and he's really just having a photo shoot with photographers who cannot speak in English, and her translator is basically just simplifying the essence of what he's saying, and the photographers are saying, and I think that is the most hilarious thing I've seen in a while in a movie that doesn't allow much comedy, broad comedy, I guess, and that is, I think, one of the most funniest thing I've seen in a movie, and also there's one of the scenes where it's called the Japanese Johnny Carson scene, in which Bob is being interviewed by what essentially is the Johnny Carson of the Japan, which I guess means that he is one of the most prominent talk show hosts in the country. And it's just so absurd that at the same time really captures what Japanese. You need to watch this movie and watch that scene and saw that that is it's almost a caricature of what Japanese entertainment industry is, but at the same time I think it's a real show. It imitates from a real show, and I think Bob is not accustomed to that. There's that culture shock moment that is so great, that awkwardness from Bob and the host, and also the translator who needs to translate what's the host saying, to me is, I think, one of the broadest comedy in the movie, because Bill Murray in here is so amazing. I think Bill Murray is known for his broad comedy in Saturday Night Live, but I think this is one of the most controlled, yet at the same time boldest performance from Bill Murray. And Bill Murray is the muse of the movie. Sofia Coppola has been saying that without Bill Murray, there is no movie, because essentially, she was her muse, he was her muse, and even in the speech when Coppola won for original screenplay, she said that every filmmaker needs their muse, and Bill Murray was her muse, and without Bill Murray, there's no movie, which I think I get that when watching this movie, because his character is so well written, well developed, and has this presence which I think elevates by Bill Murray's acting, because this character is really present. Both of these characters is real presence. Yet at the same time, Charlotte and Bob has this distance that cannot be explained yet at the same, because it's so complex. Yet this movie just shown how these people are really not enjoying things and having the distance. Again, I say it a lot of times, distance, that I think really sold the movie to me. Again, the ending, I want to say, is, I think, one of the best ending I've seen in a movie in a long while. And it is still one of the best endings in movie ever made. which is I think I'm it's not a spoiler anymore because this movie has been there for almost a decade now, not almost a decade, more than a decade, and ending was Bob whispering a parting words with to Charlotte, was I think is the most enigmatic experience in a movie I've ever seen. Yet at the same time, it's such an exercise of the power of silence in the cinemas. It shows how not knowing doesn't make you confused as an audience, but it intensifies the scene. It makes you really just. It makes the word not matter. What Bob's saying to Charlotte doesn't matter anymore. But the essence, you've seen the essence that there is this declaration of love, I guess, that we did not need to know. And even Sofia Coppola says that the ones who know the words that Bob whispered to Charlotte are just the actors, which is Bill Murray just um, pretty much uh, improvised the ending. And I think that is the best way to do it, is not knowing. Yet at the same time, it became this sort of grand gesture that we never saw coming. At the same time, we get it. And one of the ways to know how the reaction to that scene is such intense is how much ending theories of the movies, like conspiracy theories about what is Bob saying to Charlotte. There's a whole article. There's even a subreddit in Reddit about what is Bob saying to Charlotte. One of which I think was pretty wild, yet at the same time makes sense, is that Bob is whispering for Charlotte to tell the truth to her husband because Bob is her husband. Bob is her husband from the future. It's so bizarre yet at the same time so true. I'm gonna link the that conspiracy theory in our further reading list. But you gotta see it because it's so wild, and at the same time, it shows how that ending is perfect, and it makes it even more exciting. Sometimes when you watch a movie and they explain the ending in a way, they narrate you to the ending. I guess it makes you feel. In my experience, sometimes it makes you feel stupid as an audience, meaning that the filmmakers sometimes think that as an audience you need to be explained everything. Yet what I love about this movie is that you don't need to know everything, but at the same time you get the feeling of it, and it makes sense because, like any human's experience, you are not being explained from the get go, the A to Z of our lives as a person. And in a movie, I think sometimes the characters, in order to make it relatable that this character is really living in a movie, I think you need that sort of the unknown space that you don't have to be explained everything as an audience, and it's more magical, I think, because it gives you an interaction with the piece, the project, the film, and makes it like a two-way mirror for saying like this is my story. A filmmaker can say this is my story, yet at the same time like you can have your own interpretation to it, which I think is the way to go for making a movie. And yeah, I guess this is one of the best Sofia Coppola movies I've seen, and I've seen a lot. I've watched The Bling Ring, I've watched Marie Antoinette, which I think was a very cool interpretation of what Marie Antoinette. At the same time, there is a conversation that is more of a revisionist because Marie Antoinette has a very bad image, especially for French, and she almost like glorifies Marie Antoinette, but I don't think that is the case. But yeah, and I've watched Somewhere also recently, which I think it's one of the quietest movies of Sofia Coppola. I mean, Lost in Translation is a quiet movie, I guess, but Somewhere is so quiet yet at the same time, it's so it gives you a magical feeling to it. that you are thrown into this character's life. But Lost in Translation to me is a sample that sum up her movies, which is like it's stylish with a hint of sensuality, not sexuality, sensuality. You can see that from the beginning. The first shot of the movie, I think, is Charlotte's just wearing her panties and her tank tops, sleeping, which serves you that sensuality that Sofia Coppola has. So it's stylish with a hint of sensuality that serves as a vehicle for how emotionally complex the story and the characters are. And I think you need to watch this movie as an introduction, I think, for Sofia Coppola's other works, which I think if I wanted to list how do you watch Coppola's movie, you gotta watch Lost in Translation first, and then her first short movie, which is Lick the Stars. I think there's somewhere in YouTube the movie is. I will link it below in the further reading list again, and then the Virgin Suicides, and then Marie Antoinette somewhere, and the last one is the Bling Ring, which I think the Bling Ring is one of my least favorite movies of Sofia Coppola. Not my favorite, but it's a great movie also. But yeah, Lost in Translation, you need to watch this movie and really get a sense of how Sofia Coppola gets loneliness and gets bonding and does it over romanticize a bond between two people. So yeah. Now, the second topic that I want to talk about is a work from Jane Campion. Jane Campion is the first director to win the Best Director in Cannes, the first woman, and still the only woman to win a Palme d'Or for her movie. And I guess it's shown, and it was like 2 decades ago almost, and it's just shown how we haven't progressed enough when it comes to giving women a representation from women by women in not just in Hollywood but in movies in general. And I know that the biggest blockbuster this week was Wonder Woman, which is directed by Patty Jenkins, which I guess is a triumph for female superheroes, especially by female directors. And there's not a lot of female superheroes out there. But yeah, there's a lot of progress of inclusivity when it comes to giving women representation. And Jane Campion is one of the most prominent women directors out there. Not just women directors, but as a director, she's an author. She's one of the respected directors out there. And I want to talk about Top of the Lake in particular because Jane Campion's this year also set a new historic moment when she presented a project in the form of a TV series for Cannes this year, which is the season 2 of Top of the Lake. And it's shown how TVs cannot be set aside anymore when it comes to giving you a sort of cinematic experience, because there's a lot more prominent work in television these days, and there's more profound work in television these days. And I think television, in a sense of giving an episodic form, which is more of a format that is not what a movie is, has its own advantage. I guess in some ways it's the duration, but also because of the duration, it has a time to really develop their characters and creating a more substantial, I guess, plot, because they have the time to deepen the stories. And I think that's what Jane Campion saw in making a TV series, because it's more freeing in a sense that there's the constructions in movies that are not in TV. And we're entering a golden age of television right now. And I think this series, though it was released in 2013, shows how the prestige television is rising, and this is one of the entries from Jane Campion. Season 2 will be available next September, so I want to talk about the first season of Top of the Lake. Now, the Top of the Lake was actually first conceived as a limited series, but Jane and Elizabeth Moss, one of the actresses, the lead characters who play the lead characters, really just talk about like what we're going to do. Are there going to be season 2? Because if there is, what are we going to talk about? And it takes a while for Campion to make the second season, and I guess it's now releasing in September, so we just have to see. But the first season I want to talk about is essentially Jane Campion's vision towards not the vision, but almost like a response toward rape culture. The series centers around the disappearance of 12-year-old Tui, who is 5 months pregnant. She is last seen standing chest deep in a freezing lake, and now all attention is focused on inexperienced detective Robin Griffin, played by Elizabeth Moss, who leads the investigation in the same town where she endured traumatic events years earlier. Now, I've only watched 3 episodes for reviewing this series, so I did not spoil anything, and I just want to experience it with you also. But the first 3 episodes is really, I think, the best introduction of the series. When I watched the first episode, I cannot help myself to remember about Twin Peaks, which has almost the same theme and has a bit of a resemblance when it comes to plotting. There's also a girl who's disappeared from a town, and the town is pretty weird. Although Twin Peaks found itself in a direction which is very Lynchian, a more surrealistic approach of the genre. Jane Campion's approach towards this mystery genre is more of a bleak and or kind of like more darker experience of this mystery of disappearance of a person in a town. Now, this town is a bit weird. There's 2 events, I think, who I don't think it correlates as much. The first one is the disappearance of Tui, and then there's a group of women commuting to Paradise, one of the land in the small town, which these women led by, I guess we can say, as a spiritual leader called GJ. GJ? Yeah, GJ. Played by the always delightful Holly Hunter. And these events are looking as though as it's like 2 different events coming to this town. I don't know if there is a correlation in the future episodes, although this is a 7 episode limited series, and it really just doesn't dwell on its plots a lot, which is strange because if this is a full season, meaning like there is like 10 or 12 episodes, I get if you want to pluck into other characters and really just make the plot, which is finding this girl, as a sidebar. But in the first 3 hours of the movie, I think almost 70% of the time it's not talking about the character Tui's missing and people just finding this character, but a lot of it more so is just cherry picking these characters from the town and really just zooming in to them and saw like who are they, like why they are really this way. One of which is the character played by Peter Mullen, which is Matt Mitchum, a Scotsman and the head of Mitchum family. Now, I don't think he's a villain. in this series, but there is a character whiplash from the first and the second episode in which he is so vilified and he is like the epitome of like macho man who doesn't give a shit about what she wants to do, like she's breaking rules. But in the third episode, there is a bit more vulnerability when it comes to this character, how he has a darker past and he has a bit of an issue with his mother, and I think that gets me confused a bit. But at the same time, there is that character development who you did not expect, which is such a Jane Campion thing about it. And Elizabeth Moss is sublime, I think, as Robin Griffin. Although, I got to say this, I did not think that the character is supposed to be Australian because Moss's accent is a bit on and off sometimes. There is a scene where she talks in pretty much an Australian accent, but at the same time, at the first episode, I did not see that. I thought she was an American, but then I found out that she is a detective in Sydney, specializing in sexual assault, who are bringing up to this case, in which I did not get that she is Australian, but I guess she is, and this character, I think, has a lot more bleaker underlying issues that we did not see. Maybe in the future episodes, we're going to see the origin story of this character because I guess there is this weird issues in the past with her ex-boyfriend, which is John Mitchum, another one who is prominent in the series. And this is what the series is, I think, really great, yet at the same time really confusing, which is that they gives you a hint of maybe a future plot or a future hint of this series, yet at the same time, and they just leave it there and maybe brought back like in hours and hours of after the movie, which I think is again a great thing. It's so confusing sometimes. At the same time, I'm really intrigued, and it really baits you to watch it more and more. And I want to talk also about GJ, which is the spiritual leader. This character is so interesting, and I want to know more about this character just because in the first 3 hours of the movie, the series, which is the 3 episodes, she did not have a presence that I thought. I mean, this is Holly Hunter, guys. Like, she demands an attention for her, but at the same time, this character is really just serves as a soundbite for this ridiculous sayings, as what spiritual leader usually portrays. But I guess I want to know more about this character because, like, there's an impatience and about this character that I did not see in a lot of spiritual leader portrayal in movie or series because she's very impatient. She's really just don't give a fuck with her students. Yet at the same time, I think she is an antithesis of what spiritual leader is, which I guess spiritual leader is supposed to be wise and she's not. I guess she's really just using profanity words, and I like this character. And it doesn't help that Holly Hunter playing as GJ is really looking at the resemblance of Jane Campion. If you see the photos of Jane Campion, you see that this is a portrayal of maybe how Jane Campion wanted to be portrayed or maybe reflected in this series as GJ, because there's a resemblance in this character that is so uncanny with Jane Campion, which it intrigues me in the future what this character serves as to the plot and to the stories. So, and I want to also talk about how this is supposed to be. I thought this is gonna be like a bit of a genre movie because it's a mystery movie, and there is an element to genre storytelling in which this is a mystery sort of thing. So there's always gonna be that detective, and always gonna be like following the trails of the evidence, but at the same time, this is a very loose interpretation of the genre because I am invested in how this people in the small town is about, and she really took the time to zooming into one of the characters of one of every characters in this small town, which I think is great. Yet at the same time, I want to know who did this, who raped this girl, because this girl is pregnant in the age of 12. So there's gotta be a very bleaker outcome in this series, and I don't think there will be a really great outcome that we always wanted to see in a genre like this, because there's so much dot that she just throw us that I don't think we gotta have a lot of resolution in the dots that she throw us in. So it is a really interesting series to watch and a really interesting experience of mystery genre that I think you should watch. Though I also recommend you to watch other Jane Campion's movies, one of which is The Piano, which won her the Palme d'Or, and then this movie that I really love is Bright Star, in which she talks about the last 3 years of the life of poet Joan Keats and Fanny Brown, and it's a beautiful movie with really beautiful shots. And also The Piano, I think, is one of the most prominent works of hers, in which she talks about a mute piano player and her daughter set in the mid-19th century in a rainy, muddy frontier backwater of the west coast of New Zealand. And she's a New Zealander, so this movie talks a lot about it also. And I want you to watch Jane Campion just because we did not see a lot of women directors out there, and it's really interesting to see that there is another perspective of female experience through female director. So you should definitely check her works out. For my last recommendation this week, I only have one recommendation, which is an Instagram account that I discovered while I was in a train ride going to Yogyakarta, which the Instagram account is called Cynic Simpson, Cynic_Simpson. In the bio, it says it's dedicated to showing the most beautiful scenes, colors, sets, and abstract compositions from The Simpsons from season 1 to 10. And it is. Every single post in this account is really just dedicated to really just the most scenic, I guess, shots in every Simpson episode, and they're so beautiful. I did not think that The Simpsons, which is a silly cartoon, have this scenic yet at the same time very colorful, muted colors scenes. And yeah, it's just a weirdly delightful account on Instagram, so you might want to follow that. So that is my last recommendation for this week. And that is the end of the show. You can check the further reading list for every topic this week on the website www.invalidopinion.id, and tell us what you think on our Instagram page at invalid.opinion. Or you can post your thought on Facebook on facebook.com/opinioninvalid. I'll see you guys in the next episode, and please take my word with a grain of salt.